Hi everyone, my name is Tim Franklin. I'm the Senior Associate Dean and the Director of the Medill Local News Initiative and the John M. Mutz Chair in Local News.
And I'm Zach Metzger, the Director of the State of Local News Project here at Medill.
We thought it would be helpful to talk through what happens behind the scenes in the creation of our annual State of Local News Report. And so we have Zach here, and Zach is going to answer some of the questions about this year's report and what went into its development over the course of the last several months. So Zach, let's start off talking about your background a little bit. You've been involved in this project for a number of years. This is your first year as director. Tell us about that.
So I've been involved with this project now for going on almost 5 years. I started working for this project while it was at UNC Chapel Hill with Penny Abernathy. UNC is where I was pursuing my PhD, which I just finished up this year. And working with Penny, I worked closely with Penny on the State of Local News project at UNC. Then when Penny and the project moved to Northwestern, I moved along with it. And then when Penny retired this past year, I took over as director.
Yeah, well, we're happy you made that move. So talk a little bit about the background of the State of Local News Report and how it's different this year.
So the State of Local News project started at UNC under Penny Abernathy in 2014. And it was the project that really put the concept of news deserts on the map. The idea of an area without access to local news. What happens when a newspaper disappears? What are the effects on a community when they don't have access to local news? What does that look like? And what are the factors that go into those changes within the news industry? So initially, the project was really mainly focused on newspapers, on daily and weekly local newspapers. But over the years, it's expanded its scope to be thinking about other kinds of news outlets that are doing the same job of providing local news to a community that a traditional local newspaper did. And so starting in 2019-2020, the project expanded to look at digital-only news sites. And then from there, we've also expanded our database to include public broadcasting stations, NPR stations, as well as ethnic and foreign language media. And then this year, we expanded the project to look at network news sites, things like Patch, Axios Local, States Newsroom, that are taking the digital model of local news, but within an umbrella of a larger network organization.
Yes, so to summarize, this is a very involved and complicated project that takes months and months to pull together, lots of data. Tell us a little bit about how this report is compiled and its methodology.
So we have a really fantastic team working here at Medill that makes this possible. We have 2 full-time researchers working for the project, Srishti Bose and John Volk. They do a lot of the collection and analysis, turning all of that data into our many maps and graphics and the report itself. And then we also have, depending on the time of the year, between 6 and 8 undergraduate student researchers, all students at Medill, who do a lot of the groundwork of actually collecting, compiling, and processing the data from the many different sources that we collect it from. So we pull data from state press associations, from industry groups, and membership organizations, from government sources like the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and combine all of this data together to power our database. And in addition to that, we also do a layer of content analysis to ensure that the outlets included in our database are actually doing the job of providing original local reporting to the communities that they cover. It may be the case that a paper that's listed in a press association's list of memberships, that might be a total market coverage paper or a shop or something like that. And so we do that layer of content analysis to make sure that the organizations included in our database, they meet that minimum threshold.
So this isn't just a census of everything that calls itself a local news outlet. We actually do some of our own fact checking before they make it into the database.
Absolutely, and it's actually for that reason that there are certain types of media that aren't included in our database currently, things like commercial television, commercial radio. It's a challenge to try to find transcripts of those types of content for the entire country that would allow us to do that kind of content analysis.
Right, in the case of TV, we're looking at community local news,
right.
and TV stations cover such wide swaths of geography that it's virtually impossible for them to cover every community in a metro market.
Absolutely.
So what would you characterize as some of the top line findings from the report this year?
So the number of news deserts has been expanding. This is sort of a consistent trend that we've been seeing since this project's origins, that the number of counties without access to local news, that has been steadily increasing. There are currently 208 counties in the United States without a source of local news, and a little over 1,560 counties with only one source of local news. So about half or more than half of all of the counties in the United States have limited or no access to local news. Then we've continued to lose newspapers at a rate that's pretty consistent to what it was last year. This past year, we lost 127 newspapers through closures and mergers, so a rate of a little bit more than 2 a week. Employment within the newspaper industry continues to decline pretty drastically. This past year, we lost 7,000 newspaper jobs. Since 2005, about over 70% of newspaper jobs have disappeared, which, to put that into some context, is a percentage loss on par with textile manufacturers and manufacturers of cassette tapes. So it's been a really staggering loss in the number of newspaper jobs. There's less than 100,000 people still employed in the newspaper industry. This has also been a record year for the number of papers that have changed ownership. Over 250 newspapers have changed hands across 75 different transactions in this past year to a little under 60 unique buyers, which is much higher than it was in the previous 2 years.
And we're not just looking at the current situation, which is rough, as you just described, but we're also looking ahead with where local news is headed. So could you talk a little bit about the watch list and what that is showing us?
Yeah, so the Medill watch list was created last year through the work of researchers and faculty members at Medill who tried to take different common variables and demographics that are consistent across news deserts and see if we could make predictive models that would factor in those demographics to try to understand across the country where might news deserts occur, which areas are at risk of losing their news. So last year we put together a watch list of 228 counties at critical risk of losing their news. In this most recent update, we found that 10 of those counties actually had lost their news over the course of the past year. In this current report, we have updated or expanded that watch list to 279 counties. That increase is mostly due to the larger number of single source counties that exist today. But we did the same process of trying to use demographic characteristics to make predictive models of where, over the next 5 years, counties might be particularly vulnerable to losing their last remaining source of local news. And it's our hope and ambition that this watch list isn't just a warning sign, but also can help to direct investment or support to the areas where it is needed the most.
Right, absolutely. So things are tough, and they show no signs of turning based on the watch list. In fact, that there are more counties on the watch list. But are there any reasons for optimism?
There are, and I think one of the big numbers that's optimistic is the fact that this hasn't just been all losses. Over the past 5 years, we've tracked more than 250 new startups. Most of those have been digital, but that includes around 40 print startups that have emerged over the past 5 years. There's also been, in this past year in particular, some major legislative pushes and policy proposals. The federal policy packages that have been proposed, that were proposed in 2020 and 2021, those have somewhat stalled, and it's mainly the states now that are pursuing these different legislative options. Illinois this past year just passed a large bill that's providing tax cuts to local news organizations. New York passed a similar bill this past year, and there's about a dozen other states that currently have legislative packages like that on the books. And then beyond that, there's also been a large philanthropic endeavor over the past year or 2 years. The Press Forward campaign in particular has pledged $500 million, I think it's $600 million now to support local news over the next several years. So it's possible that the confluence of these different factors, philanthropy, public policy, and the desire to create local news outlets, that these can come together to offer a path to sustainability.
So while the business model for local news has basically imploded, we're in this kind of historic period where a new model or new models are being experimented with for the future, which is encouraging. And so along those lines, what are we seeing in ways of bright spots for local news in the future?
So last year we started this feature of the local news report of focusing on bright spots, and that tracks two things. It tracks the new startups, the 250 that have emerged over the past 5 years, as well as a different group of news outlets that are profiled each year that are doing something interesting, innovative, pursuing new paths and business models that could be models for other organizations in the industry. This year we profiled a group of 12 news outlets that are doing that kind of work. This includes everything from large traditional print outlets to smaller digital for-profit and nonprofit organizations. It includes groups like Georgia's Media in Louisiana that has just launched a new outlet in Shreveport. Includes groups like the Salt Lake City Tribune that recently became a nonprofit, as well as smaller organizations like Connect to Arizona that started as a WhatsApp group during the pandemic, but has since grown into a fully fledged news outlet in Arizona.
Yeah, so the through bright spots, people can see and maybe be inspired by some of these new models that are happening around the country and some of the changes that are occurring.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Well, Zach, thank you. Thanks for your time, and I hope everybody will take a look at the 2024 State of Local News Report, and please let us know what you think and write us in with your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.